The call came on a humid Thursday morning in July 2025. Detective Elena Harper was in her office at the Seattle Police Department's Major Crimes Unit, staring at a stack of reports she no longer had the energy to read. At 61, with 38 years on the force and only months away from mandatory retirement, she had learned to recognize the weight of certain phone calls before the person on the other end even spoke. This was one of them. Detective Harper? The voice belonged to Special Agent Marcus Reyes from the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Elena had worked with him on cold cases before. He never called just to chat. Yes. We have a DNA hit on Ethan Carter. The words landed like a punch to the sternum. Ethan Carter, the name that had lived in a special folder on her desk for a quarter of a century. The case she had refused to archive, even when commanders told her to let it go. The 7-year-old boy who disappeared from his front yard on a crisp autumn afternoon in 2000 and never came home. Elena's hand tightened around the phone. You're sure? Positive. Parabon Nanolabs ran genetic genealogy on the unknown profile from the evidence recovered in 2001. They built a family tree, narrowed it down, and got a confirmatory hit 3 days ago. We have remains, Elena, and we have a name for who put them there. She closed her eyes. After 25 years of waiting for this call, she had always imagined relief. Instead, there was only a hollow ache. Where? She asked quietly. Shallow grave in the woods off Highway 2, about 12 miles east of Gold Bar. Construction crew found bones during clearing last month. Dental records and the new DNA match confirm it's Ethan. Elena exhaled slowly. And the suspect? In custody as of 6 a.m. this morning. Name's Gerald Francis Lowry, 68 years old, lives alone in Everett, no prior record that would have flagged him back then. A distant cousin. Uploaded DNA to a public genealogy site in 2023. That's what finally broke it open. Gerald Lowry. A name Elena had never heard before today. She glanced at the framed photo on her desk. Ethan Carter at 7, gap-toothed grin, blonde hair sticking up holding a plastic lightsaber like it was Excalibur. The picture had been on milk cartons, on posters, on the news for years. Then, slowly, it had faded from public view, but never from her office. I need to tell the family, Elena said. We'll do it together, Marcus replied. But I thought you should hear it first. You carried this case longer than anyone. After she hung up, Elena sat in silence for a long time. Outside her window, Seattle traffic moved in its usual indifferent rhythm. Inside, 25 years collapsed into a single moment. She pulled out the original case file, thick, worn, edges curled, and opened it to the first page. There, in her own handwriting from October 12, 2000, were the words that had started everything. Missing. Ethan James Carter, age 7. Last seen approximately 3:45 p.m., playing in front yard of 1427 Pinecrest Drive, Shoreline, Washington. To understand how a little boy could vanish in broad daylight and remain lost for 25 years, we have to go back to the beginning. Back to that ordinary Thursday in October 2000, when the leaves were turning and the air smelled like rain and wood smoke. Ethan Carter was 7 years old, a second grader at Ridgecrest Elementary with a passion for Star Wars, Legos, and anything that involved running full speed. His mother, Laura Carter, was a third-grade teacher at the same school. His father, Michael Carter, was a software engineer at a growing company in Redmond, one of the early wave of tech workers who hadn't yet made the city unaffordable. They lived in a quiet cul-de-sac in Shoreline, just north of Seattle. A split-level house with a big front yard, a basketball hoop in the driveway, and neighbors who waved when they walked their dogs. It was the kind of place where kids still played outside until the streetlights came on. October 12, 2000 was a teacher in-service day. No school. Laura had taken the day off to spend it with Ethan. Michael was at work. The plan was simple: laundry, errands, maybe a trip to the park in the afternoon. Ethan had eaten macaroni and cheese for lunch and was buzzing with energy. "Mom, can I play outside, just in the front yard?" Laura hesitated for half a second. The yard was fully visible from the kitchen window. The street was quiet. She'd be right there. "Sure, buddy, stay where I can see you. No going past the mailbox." "Okay." Ethan bolted out the door, lightsaber in hand, already narrating an epic battle between Jedi and Sith. Laura watched him from the sink as she washed dishes. He was dueling an invisible enemy near the maple tree, making whooshing sounds, leaping dramatically. She smiled, shook her head, and turned to load the dishwasher. It took less than a minute. When she glanced back up, the front yard was empty. The lightsaber lay abandoned on the grass. "Ethan?" she called, drying her hands. No answer. She stepped onto the porch. "Ethan James, this isn't funny. Come out now." Nothing. A flicker of unease. She walked down the steps, scanned the yard, the driveway, the side of the house. "Ethan!" Her voice sharpened. Neighbors' doors opened. Mrs. Lang from across the street appeared, holding her mail. "Everything okay, Laura?" "I can't find Ethan. He was right here." They searched together, behind bushes, in the garage, under the deck. Other neighbors joined. Within minutes, the cul-de-sac was alive with voices calling his name. Laura ran inside and dialed 911 at 3:52 p.m. "911, what is your emergency?" "My son is missing," she said, and her voice cracked on the word missing. "He's 7. He was playing in the front yard and now he's gone." The dispatcher stayed calm, asked the questions. Description, clothing, how long, exact location. Laura could barely form sentences. Blue jeans, red Nike t-shirt with a dinosaur on it, light-up Spider-Man sneakers, blonde hair. He's tall for his age. Please hurry. The first patrol car arrived within 7 minutes. Officer Daniel Park stepped out, saw the cluster of worried neighbors, and felt the familiar twist in his gut that came with missing child calls. By the time Michael Carter screeched into the driveway 20 minutes later, there were 4 patrol cars, a K-9 unit, and a growing knot of onlookers. He found Laura on the front lawn, arms wrapped around herself, face streaked with tears. "Where is he?" Michael demanded, voice rising. "Laura, where's Ethan?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I looked away for a minute. Just 1 minute." Michael turned to Officer Park. "How does a kid disappear from his own yard in the middle of the day?" They didn't have an answer yet. Detective Elena Harper arrived at 4:47 p.m. She was 36 then, 15 years on the force, already known for her doggedness on child cases. She took one look at the abandoned lightsaber on the grass and felt the case settle into her bones. She spoke briefly to Laura and Michael, then began coordinating. K-9 units were deployed immediately. The dog picked up Ethan's scent from the lightsaber, tracked it across the lawn to the curb in front of the mailbox, and stopped. The handler looked up. "Scent ends here." He got into a vehicle. The words hung in the cooling air. Not wandered off, not hiding, taken. By sunset, the search had expanded. Dozens of officers canvassed the neighborhood. Helicopters with forward-looking infrared swept the surrounding woods and ravines. Amber Alert activated. Ethan's photo, the one with the gap-toothed grin, flashed across television screens statewide. Laura and Michael sat in their living room surrounded by uniformed strangers. Family members arrived. Coffee was made that no one drank. Laura kept replaying those 60 seconds in her mind. The turn to the dishwasher, the glance back up, empty yard. "I should have watched him every second," she whispered to Michael. "Don't," he said, but his voice was hollow. They both knew guilt was only the beginning. Elena set up a command post in the dining room. Tips began flooding in almost immediately. Every parent's nightmare made real on the evening news. A green van seen in the area. A man acting strangely at a nearby park. A boy matching Ethan's description at a rest stop on I-5. Every lead was chased. Everyone went cold. By midnight, over 200 personnel were involved. Volunteers arrived with flashlights. The temperature dropped into the 40s. Searchers moved through blackberry thickets and dense forest, calling Ethan's name into the darkness. No response. As dawn broke on October 13th, the reality began to settle in. This wasn't a lost child who'd be found cold and scared in a few hours. This was an abduction. And in stranger abductions, the first 3 hours are critical. They were already 13 hours in. Elena stood on the Carter's lawn watching the sun rise, coffee gone cold in her hand. She looked at the lightsaber still lying where Ethan had dropped it and made a silent promise to the boy she'd never met. "I won't stop looking, but 25 years is a long time to keep a promise." And And sometimes the answers, when they finally come, are not the ones anyone wanted. The first 48 hours after Ethan Carter disappeared were a blur of controlled chaos. By Friday morning, October 13, 2000, the search had grown into one of the largest in Washington state history. More than 400 volunteers joined law enforcement, spreading out in grid patterns through the wooded areas north of Shoreline. Helicopters thumped overhead. Boats dragged the nearby shores of Echo Lake and Hidden Lake. Divers went into Boeing Creek. Every tip, no matter how small, was pursued. A woman called to say she'd seen a silver sedan driving slowly down Pinecrest Drive around 3:30 p.m. the previous day. She couldn't remember the license plate, but she thought the driver was an older man wearing a baseball cap. A composite sketch was rushed out, broadcast on every local station that night. Another caller reported seeing a boy crying in the backseat of a dark pickup at a gas station in Linwood. Officers raced there, reviewed grainy security footage, and found nothing. The tip line rang constantly. Most calls were from well-meaning people who thought they'd seen Ethan at a mall, a McDonald's, a ferry terminal. Each sighting was checked, each was ruled out. Inside the Carter home, the atmosphere was thick with fear and coffee fumes. Laura hadn't slept. She sat on the couch clutching Ethan's favorite stuffed animal, a worn-out Chewbacca, rocking slightly, eyes fixed on the front door as if willing it to open and reveal her son bounding in with an apology for hiding too well. Michael paced, phone glued to his ear, calling everyone he knew, begging for any rumor, any whisper. He snapped at officers when updates were slow, then immediately apologized. Grief and helplessness were turning him into someone neither he nor Laura recognized. Detective Elena Harper barely left the command center in the dining room. She coordinated with the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, who arrived from Seattle that afternoon. Special Agent Lisa Chen, a calm, no-nonsense veteran, took charge of the federal side. "We're treating this as a stranger abduction," Lisa told the family gently. "That gives us certain investigative avenues, registered offenders in the area, traffic cameras, known predators with vehicles matching witness descriptions." Laura's voice was hoarse. "Do you think he's still alive?" Lisa didn't lie. "We are operating under the assumption that he is. The first week is critical. We are doing everything humanly possible." But privately, among the investigators, the statistics were whispered. In non-family abductions, if a child isn't recovered within the first 24 hours, the likelihood of finding them alive drops sharply. By Saturday, the media frenzy was in full swing. Ethan's face stared out from the front page of the Seattle Times under the headline, "7-Year-Old Vanishes from Front Yard." National networks picked it up. CNN ran his photo every hour. America's Most Wanted producers called, asking for an interview. Reporters camped on the cul-de-sac. Neighbors complained about blocked driveways. Laura and Michael gave a tearful press conference on their lawn, flanked by Elena and Agent Chen. "Please," Laura begged, voice breaking, "if you have our son, let him go. He's just a little boy. He needs his mommy and daddy. If anyone saw anything at all, please call the police." Michael added, "We just want Ethan home safe. No questions asked." The tip line exploded again. A potential breakthrough came Sunday afternoon. A hiker in Discovery Park, like 12 miles south, reported finding a child's light-up Spider-Man sneaker near a trail. It matched the description of what Ethan had been wearing. Elena and a team rushed to the scene. The shoe was the right brand, right size, but when they compared it to the mate still in Ethan's bedroom, the tread pattern was slightly different, mass-produced, not his. Hope flared and died in the space of hours. By the end of the first week, the massive ground search was scaled back. Volunteers went home exhausted. The helicopters stopped flying. The command center moved to the police station. But the investigation continued. Every registered sex offender within a 50-mile radius was interviewed. Alibis checked, vehicles examined, nothing linked directly to Ethan. Traffic cameras from nearby intersections were reviewed frame by frame, but in 2000, coverage was spotty, and Pinecrest Drive had none. Detectives went door to door a second time, then a third. A retired couple 2 streets over mentioned that they'd seen a white panel van parked oddly near the neighborhood entrance around 3 p.m. on the day Ethan vanished. They hadn't thought much of it at the time, The van had no company logo, and they couldn't recall the plate. Another dead end, but it went into the file. As October bled into November, the intensity faded from public view. The news cycle moved on. Ethan's posters stayed up on telephone poles and in store windows, but people stopped staring at them. Inside the Carter house, time froze. Laura couldn't go back to teaching. She spent days in Ethan's room, arranging and rearranging his Legos, folding clothes he would never wear again. She kept his toothbrush in the bathroom cup, his backpack by the door. Michael returned to work after 3 weeks because bills didn't stop. Colleagues offered awkward condolences. Some avoided him in the hallways. He came home each night to a silent house and a wife who barely spoke. They fought, quiet, vicious arguments born of pain. "You should have been watching him," Michael said once, immediately hating himself. Laura's response was a shattered plate against the kitchen wall. They attended support groups for parents of missing children, heard stories of recoveries after years, but also stories of bodies found decades later. They clung to the recoveries, tried to ignore the rest. Thanksgiving came. They set a place for Ethan at the table out of habit, then couldn't eat. Christmas was worse. Laura bought presents anyway, wrapped them, placed them under a tree that felt obscene in its cheer. She sat on the floor, Christmas morning, and sobbed while Michael stared out the window. On January 14, 2001, Ethan's 8th birthday, they released 8 blue balloons into a gray sky. Laura whispered, "Happy birthday, baby," as they floated away. Detective Harper visited regularly, even when there was nothing new to report. She brought small updates, another offender interviewed, another tip chased. Mostly, she just sat with them. "I know it doesn't feel like it," she told Laura one February afternoon, "but we are still working this case every day." Laura nodded, eyes hollow. "Do you think he suffered?" Elena didn't answer right away. "I think about him every day too," she said finally, "and I promise you, I will never close this file." Spring arrived. The case officially went cold in April 2001, 6 months after the disappearance. Resources were needed elsewhere. New missing children, new murders. But Elena refused to let it die completely. She kept the file active, reviewed it every few months, attended national conferences on cold cases. The Carters held a candlelight vigil on the first anniversary. Hundreds attended. Laura spoke again, voice stronger this time, edged with steel. "Someone knows something," she said into the microphones. "Someone saw that van, that man, that moment. Please come forward. We need to bring Ethan home." Tips trickled in again. All investigated, all nothing. By 2002, the marriage was fraying beyond repair. They slept in separate bedrooms. Conversations were logistical. Bills, groceries, whose turn to call the detective. Laura started volunteering with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. She needed purpose, needed to feel she was doing something. Michael threw himself into work, took promotions that required travel. Distance felt safer than staying home with the ghosts. In 2003, they separated quietly. No dramatic fight, just an acknowledgement that living together was destroying what was left of them. Michael moved into an apartment downtown. Laura stayed in the house on Pinecrest Drive. She couldn't leave. What if Ethan came back and no one was there? She kept his room exactly as it had been on October 12, 2000. Bed made. Legos on the desk mid-construction, lightsaber on the floor where he'd left it that morning. Every October 12th, she sat in the front yard from 3:00 to 4:00 p.m., watching the street, waiting for a miracle that never came. Detective Harper was promoted to sergeant in 2004. New responsibilities, new cases. But Ethan's file stayed on her desk. New technologies emerged. In 2005, she submitted evidence for mitochondrial DNA testing. Hair from Ethan's brush, possible trace evidence. From the lawn. The database was small then, no hits. Age-progressed images were created and distributed. Ethan at 10, at 12, at 15. Laura stared at them for hours, trying to see her son in the computer-generated faces. In 2007, the house on Pinecrest was sold. Laura couldn't afford it alone, and the memories were suffocating. She moved to a small apartment in Ballard, taking Ethan's belongings in boxes she couldn't unpack. Michael remarried in 2009, a kind woman named Rachel who understood he would never fully heal. They had a daughter in 2011. Michael named her Emily, close enough to Ethan that it hurt, far enough that it felt like a tribute. Laura dated briefly, but no relationship lasted. How do you explain to someone new that part of your heart is forever 7 years old and missing? By 2010, 10 years gone, public memory had faded almost completely. Ethan's case was one name among thousands on missing children websites, but Elena Harper, now in her late 40s, still pulled the file every October. She read the witness statements again, looked at the composite sketches, wondered what she'd missed. She attended a conference where investigators discussed emerging DNA techniques, things called familial searches, genetic genealogy. Still experimental, not ready for prime time. Yet. The Carters aged visibly. Laura's hair went gray early. Michael developed ulcers. They met once a year on Ethan's birthday, released balloons, spoke little. Grief had become a private language they no longer shared fluently. And somewhere, in a shallow grave no one had found yet, Ethan waited. 25 years is a long time to wait. But sometimes, science catches up to sorrow. The years after 2010 settled into a quiet, relentless ache. Ethan Carter's disappearance had become one of those cases people in the Pacific Northwest still remembered if you mentioned the name. The little boy with the lightsaber, taken from his own front yard. But memory is fragile. New tragedies pushed old ones aside. Ethan's posters came down. His face stopped appearing on the evening news. For the people who loved him, though, time did not blur the edges. It sharpened them. Laura Carter turned 45 in 2012. She celebrated alone in her Ballard apartment with a single cupcake and a candle she didn't light. She had stopped releasing balloons years earlier. Watching them drift away felt too much like letting go. She still volunteered with missing children organizations, answering hotlines, helping other parents navigate the nightmare she knew too well. It gave her purpose, but it also kept the wound open. Every new case reminded her that some children came home and some never did. Michael Carter's life had taken a different path. His daughter Emily was growing fast, blonde curls, bright blue eyes, a laugh that could fill a room. Rachel was patient, loving, but there were moments when Michael caught himself staring at Emily and seeing Ethan at the same age. He felt guilty for the joy Emily brought him, as if happiness was a betrayal. He and Laura spoke on Ethan's birthday and on the anniversary of the disappearance. Their conversations were careful, scripted. "How are you holding up?" "Same as always." They never talked about moving on. Detective Elena Harper, now Sergeant Harper, had moved to the cold case unit in 2011. It was supposed to be a quieter assignment as she neared retirement age, but for her it was exactly where she needed to be. Ethan's file lived in the bottom drawer of her desk. Every October 12th, she pulled it out, spread the contents across her workspace, and read every page again. Witness statements, tip logs, lab reports, the composite sketches that had never led anywhere. She had long ago memorized the details: the white panel van, the possible silver sedan, the older man in the baseball cap. None of it had ever connected. In 2013, a new tool appeared on the horizon: genetic genealogy. Elena attended a national conference in Quantico where investigators talked about using commercial DNA databases to solve decades-old cases. A rape murder in California had just been cracked after 30 years. The Golden State Killer case was still fresh in everyone's mind. She came home energized. She submitted a request to have Ethan's case profiled for genetic genealogy as soon as the technology became viable for law enforcement. The answer came back: not yet. Budget constraints, backlog, need more evidentiary DNA. There was trace biological material recovered from the lawn near where the lightsaber had been found. Skin cells, possibly transferred when Ethan dropped the toy. But in 2000, the sample had been too small for meaningful nuclear DNA testing. It had been preserved, frozen, waiting. Elena checked on it every year. In 2015, Laura agreed to a televised interview on the 15th anniversary. She sat under harsh studio lights and spoke calmly about living with uncertainty. "People ask me if I've accepted that he's gone," she said. "I haven't. I can't. Until someone shows me proof he's still out there somewhere. Maybe living a different life. Maybe needing help to come home. I have to believe that." The interview aired nationally. Tips poured in again, hundreds of them. Elena's team chased everyone: a boy in Montana who looked like the age-progressed image, a young man in Portland claiming repressed memories, a grave site reported by an anonymous caller, all false. By 2018, genetic genealogy was exploding. Dozens of cold cases were being solved. Elena resubmitted her request, this time with support from the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Approval came in early 2019. Parabon Nanolabs received the sample, the tiny speck of hope preserved for nearly 2 decades. They built a profile and uploaded it to GED Match, the public database that allowed law enforcement searches at the time. Elena waited. Weeks turned into months. No close matches. There were distant cousins, 4th, 5th, 6th, but nothing strong enough to build a family tree with confidence. The trail went cold again. Laura turned 50 in 2017. Michael turned 52. Emily started middle school. Elena's husband, Tom, retired from teaching and began gently suggesting they travel, enjoy the years they had left. Elena nodded, promised after retirement, but they both knew Ethan's case would follow her to the end. In 2020, the pandemic hit. The world shut down. Cold casework slowed. Labs closed temporarily. Elena worked from home, reviewing digital files, attending Zoom conferences. She started a private ritual. Every Sunday evening, she video-called Laura and Michael separately. No new information, just a check-in. A reminder that someone in law enforcement still cared. Laura appreciated it more than she could say. Michael did too, though he rarely admitted it. In 2021, a construction crew widening Highway 2 near Gold Bar unearthed human remains. Adult, they thought at first. The medical examiner's office logged them as unidentified. No connection was made to Ethan. The bones were too degraded for traditional DNA comparison at the time, and no one thought to link them to a child missing 21 years earlier from 30 miles away. The remains were photographed, sampled, and stored. In 2022, GED Match changed its policies. Law enforcement searches required opt-in consent from users. The pool of comparison profiles shrank dramatically. Elena's heart sank. Another door closing. But new databases emerged. Family tree DNA allowed opt-in searches. 23andMe remained closed to police, but millions of people were still testing. She resubmitted the profile wherever she could. Still nothing. Laura began therapy again in 2023. This time she stuck with it. She learned to say the words out loud. I think my son is dead. Saying it didn't make it easier, but it made it real. She started a small scholarship in Ethan's name at Ridgecrest Elementary for kids who loved Star Wars or building with Legos. It felt like keeping him alive in some small way. Michael and Rachel had a second child, a boy, in late 2023. They named him Lucas. Michael held his newborn son and cried for the first time in years, not just joy, but grief for the son who never got to grow up. Emily, now 12, asked questions. Why do you and Grandma Laura look sad on October 12th? Michael told her the truth, age-appropriate but honest. She started leaving drawings on the memorial page they kept for Ethan online. Elena turned 60 in 2024. Mandatory retirement loomed, 1 more year. She told her captain she would stay until Ethan's case was solved or she was forced out. He didn't argue. In early 2025, a distant cousin of Gerald Lowry, a woman in Idaho researching her family tree, uploaded her DNA to Ancestry.com. She later opted into law enforcement matching on family tree DNA. The algorithm flagged a potential connection to the unknown profile from Ethan's case, not strong, but enough to start building trees. Parabon analysts worked backward and forward through generations: birth records, marriage certificates, census data, obituaries. By May 2025, they had narrowed it to 4 possible men. One stood out. Gerald Francis Lowry, born 1957, lived alone in a rural property outside Everett. No criminal record. Worked as a maintenance man for the County Parks Department in 2000. Drove a white panel van for work. A records check showed he had taken a personal day on October 12, 2000. Elena stared at the name on the report and felt her pulse in her throat. They needed more. In June 2025, investigators obtained a discarded coffee cup from Lowry's trash. Direct DNA comparison. Match not just to the trace on the lawn, to the remains found near Gold Bar in 2021, the shallow grave. The boy who had waited 25 years had finally been found, but the news no one wanted was now inevitable. Ethan was never coming home alive, and the man who took him had lived quietly among them for a quarter century. July 9th, 2025. Detective Elena Harper had not slept. The direct DNA match from Gerald Lowry's discarded coffee cup had come back at 4:17 p.m. the previous afternoon. 99.9999% probability. The same profile that touched the grass where Ethan dropped his lightsaber. The same profile that matched the remains exhumed from the shallow grave near Gold Bar. It was over. After 25 years, the waiting was over. But the part Elena had dreaded most was about to begin. She and Special Agent Marcus Reyes agreed. The family would hear it from her first in person before the arrest hit the news. No leaks, no reporters on their doorsteps with cameras. They started with Laura. Elena called at 8 o'clock a.m. "Laura, it's Elena. I need to come see you today. In person. It's important." A long pause. Laura had learned to fear those words. "Is it about Ethan?" "Yes." "I'll be here." Laura's apartment in Ballard was quiet when they arrived. She had made coffee, more out of habit than hospitality. Her hands shook as she poured 3 cups. Elena sat across from her at the small kitchen table. Marcus stood near the door, giving them space. "We found Ethan," Elena said softly. Laura's breath caught. Her eyes searched Elena's face for the rest of the sentence. "He's not alive, honey. I'm so sorry." Laura made no sound at first. She simply closed her eyes, as if the words were a physical blow she needed to absorb. When she opened them again, tears were already falling. "Where?" Remains were recovered in 2021 during roadwork near Gold Bar. They weren't identified then, but new DNA testing. "It's him. Dental records confirm it too." Laura nodded slowly. "So he never left Washington?" "No." Was it quick?" Elena hesitated. They didn't have the full story yet. "We believe so. We have a suspect in custody. We're questioning him now." Laura wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "Do you know who?" "We do. His name is Gerald Lowry. He worked for the County Parks Department in 2000, drove a white panel van. He lived in Everett all this time." Laura stared at the coffee cooling in her cup. "He just lived while we—" "Yes." She was quiet for a long time. Then, "Thank you for telling me yourself." Elena reached across and took her hand. "I promised I would never stop. I needed you to hear the truth from me." Laura squeezed back hard. "I knew deep down, but knowing and knowing are different." They sat together until the tears slowed. Elena explained what would happen next: formal identification, release of the remains for burial, media attention. Laura listened, nodded, asked practical questions with a calm that surprised even herself. When they left, she stood at the door and hugged Elena fiercely. "Bring him home when you can," she whispered. Michael was next. He lived in Bellevue now, in a comfortable house with a backyard and swing set. Rachel answered the door, saw their faces, and immediately called Michael from his home office. They gathered in the living room. Emily and Lucas were at summer camp, a small mercy. Michael sat on the couch, hands clasped between his knees. Rachel beside him holding his arm. Elena delivered the news the same way, direct, gentle, complete. "We found Ethan. He's been gone since that day. We have the person responsible in custody." Michael's face went white. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, staring at the floor. "Dead," he said, not a question. "Yes." Rachel began to cry quietly. Michael didn't. Not yet. "How?" he asked. "We're still getting the full account," Elena said. But he admitted to taking Ethan, said it was impulsive, that Ethan became scared in the car, that he panicked. Michael's voice was rough. "He killed him." "Yes." Silence stretched. Outside, a lawnmower droned in the distance. Finally, Michael looked up. "All those years we hoped he was out there, living some other life. He was 12 miles away, in the ground." Elena nodded. Michael stood abruptly, walked to the window, stared out at the sunny yard where his younger children played on weekends. I need to tell Emily, he said. She's old enough now. Rachel went to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. Only then did his shoulders begin to shake. Elena gave them space, answered questions, promised updates. Before leaving, Michael hugged her too. You kept your word, he said, after all this time. I wish the ending had been different. Me too. But at least it's an ending. That afternoon, the arrest team moved in. Gerald Lowry was watering flower beds in his front yard when the unmarked cars pulled up. He looked up, saw the officers approaching, and simply set the hose down. He did not run, did not protest. He was read his rights in the driveway, cuffed and placed in the back of a sedan. Neighbors watched from windows, confused. At the station, he waived his right to an attorney almost immediately. Elena observed from behind the glass as the interrogation began. Lowry sat, straight, hands cuffed to the table. His voice was calm, almost detached. I knew this day would come eventually, he said, especially after all those DNA shows on TV. The interviewer asked why he did it. I don't know, Lowry said. I saw him playing, alone. He looked like a happy kid. I told him his mother sent me to pick him up for a surprise. He believed me. Got in the van without a fuss. And then? He started asking questions, where we were going, when he'd see his mom. Then he got scared, started crying. Loud. I was afraid someone would hear. I pulled off the highway onto a dirt road. Told him to be quiet. He wouldn't stop. I put my hand over his mouth. Held it too long. He paused, looked at his hands. When I took it away, he wasn't breathing anymore. Elena felt bile rise in her throat. Lowry continued without prompting. I dug a shallow grave with a shovel I had in the van, covered him with dirt and leaves, drove home, went to work. The next day. No remorse in his tone, just facts. Investigators pressed for more. Had he done this before? Planned it? Kept trophies? No, he insisted. It was the only time, impulse, opportunity, panic. He could not explain why he chose that day, that child, that moment. By evening, the confession was recorded, signed. The broken lightsaber fragments and remnants of the red dinosaur t-shirt were recovered from the gravesite the following week, exactly where Lowry said they would be. The news broke the next morning. Headlines across the country. DNA cracks 25-year-old missing child case. Suspect confesses to murder. Reporters descended on Shoreline Everett Gold Bar. Laura turned off her phone. Michael took the kids out of town for a few days. Elena gave a short statement to the press. This resolution is bittersweet. A family finally has answers, but the answers confirm their worst fears. Justice for Ethan begins now. In the days that followed, Laura and Michael spoke for the first time in months. Not just logistics, but real conversation. They agreed on one thing. They wanted to bury Ethan together. A small service, no media, just family, a few old friends, and the people who had never stopped looking. They chose a quiet cemetery overlooking Puget Sound, and for the first time in 25 years they would lay their son to rest, knowing where he was, knowing what happened, knowing that the man responsible would never walk free again. It wasn't healing, but it was closure, of a kind. September 2025. The cemetery sat on a gentle hill above Puget Sound, the kind of place where the wind carried salt and pine and the horizon felt endless. A small group gathered under a gray sky that threatened rain but never quite delivered it. Laura and Michael stood side by side at the gravesite, closer than they had been in years. Rachel stood behind Michael with Emily and little Lucas, a handful of old neighbors, a few colleagues from Laura's volunteering days, and Detective Elena Harper completed the circle. There was no casket. Ethan's remains had been cremated. A simple urn rested on a pedestal, surrounded by flowers and a single plastic lightsaber, bright blue and red, brand new, bought by Emily. The minister kept it short, scripture about children in heaven, a prayer for peace. Then Laura stepped forward. She placed her hand on the urn. Ethan James Carter, she began, voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. You were 7 years old for 25 years in our hearts. You loved Star Wars, hated broccoli, built the tallest Lego towers, and gave the best hugs. You were, and always will be, our sunshine. She paused, looked at Michael. We are so sorry we couldn't protect you that day. But we never stopped loving you. Not for 1 second. Michael spoke next. His voice was rough, but he didn't look away from the urn. "I used to imagine finding you grown up," he said. "Teaching you to throw a baseball, watching you graduate, walking you down the aisle someday. I grieved those dreams for a long time. But today I'm letting them go. 'Cause you're safe now. You're whole. And we finally get to say goodbye." Emily, 15 now and taller than her grandmother, placed a folded piece of paper on the pedestal, a drawing she had made, Ethan as she imagined him, smiling, holding a lightsaber, surrounded by stars. "I never met you," she said quietly, "but Dad and Grandma told me all the stories. I wish I could have known you. I'll keep drawing for you." They scattered the ashes together, half in a small plot where a marker would soon read, "Ethan James Carter, beloved son and brother, 1993-2000, and half carried home in 2 smaller urns, one for each parent. When it was over, people lingered, hugging, sharing quiet memories. Then they drifted away until only Laura, Michael, and Elena remained. Laura turned to Elena. "Will there be a trial?" "Probably not," Elena said. "He's pleading guilty. Sentencing is set for November. Life without parole. The DA doesn't want to put you through a public trial, and he's not fighting it." Michael nodded. "Good. I don't think I could sit in the same room as him." "You won't have to," Elena said. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the water in the distance. "I keep thinking about that day," Laura said. "If I'd kept him inside 5 more minutes, if I'd walked him to the mailbox, if—" "Don't," Michael said gently. It was the first soft thing he'd said to her in years. "We both did that for decades. It doesn't change anything." Laura looked at him, surprised by the kindness in his tone. "I know," she said, "but it's hard to turn it off." Elena spoke up. "The guilt is part of loving him. It always will be, but it doesn't define the love." They nodded, absorbing that. In November 2025, Gerald Lowry was sentenced. The courtroom was nearly empty. Just court staff, a few reporters, Elena, and a victim advocate. Laura and Michael chose not to attend. They submitted their impact statements in writing, and the judge read parts aloud. Lowry, frail in an orange jumpsuit, offered no defense. He expressed no visible emotion when the judge pronounced life without possibility of parole. He died in prison 2 years later, quietly, of natural causes. No one claimed the body. December 2025. Elena Harper's retirement party was small, donuts and coffee in the precinct break room. Colleagues clapped her on the back, told stories, gave her a plaque. She kept her speech short. "I spent most of my career chasing ghosts," she said. "Some cases you solve quickly, some you never solve, and some take 25 years and break your heart even when you close them. But every single one matters. Because every missing child is someone's whole world." Later, at home, she placed Ethan's school photo on the mantel next to pictures of her grandchildren. Tom poured them wine. "You did good," he said. "I wish it had been enough." It was everything to them. January 2026. 5 months after the funeral, life had not returned to normal. There is no normal after something like this, but it had found a new shape. Laura moved to a smaller place near the water. She kept Ethan's urn on a shelf with his favorite childhood books. She continued her scholarship fund. It had grown, helped dozens of kids. She dated occasionally, cautiously. Some nights she, still cried, but more nights she smiled at memories instead of flinching from them. Michael and his family stayed in Bellevue. Lucas, now 2, loved Star Wars because his big sister told him all about Uncle Ethan. Emily kept drawing, comics now, about a Jedi guardian watching over a family. Michael coached her soccer team, threw baseballs with Lucas, and on quiet evenings sat with Rachel and admitted, for the first time, that joy and grief could live in the same heart. Laura and Michael met every January 9th, Ethan's birthday, and every October 12th. They released no more balloons. Instead, they shared a meal, told stories, laughed about the funny ones. Their relationship was not romantic again, but it was friendship, deeper than before. Genetic genealogy continued to solve cases. Dozens more children were identified, some alive, most not. Every headline reminded the public, never give up. Science can reach across decades. Elena and Tom traveled finally, a cruise to Alaska, a road trip through the Southwest. She checked the cold case databases less obsessively, but never stopped entirely. On October 12, 2026, 26 years to the day, Laura and Michael met Elena at the cemetery. They brought flowers and a new lightsaber, this one glow in the dark. They stood together in the autumn light. No one spoke for a long time. Then Laura said, "He's not lost anymore." Michael nodded. "He's home." Elena placed her hand on the marker. "Thank you for letting me keep my promise," she whispered. The wind moved through the trees, carrying the faint sound of waves. Somewhere, a child laughed in the distance, and for the first time in 25 years, the three of them felt something close to peace. Ethan Carter's case is studied now in law enforcement academies, an example of persistence, of advancing technology, of the human cost of crime. But more than that, it is a reminder. Some stories end in miracles, some end in unbearable truth. All of them deserve to be told to the end, because every child who vanishes takes a piece of the world with them, and when we find them, alive or at rest, we give that piece back, not whole, but known, remembered, loved, forever.
Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next videos, where we continue to follow the mysteries that have never slept. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned.